The studio lights burned brightly overhead as Harrison Ford settled into his seat on the View stage. He had done 100 interviews before, maybe 1,000, but something in the air today felt different. Tense. Electric. Maybe it was the hot-button topics they had already teased during the commercial break, or maybe it was the forced smile on Joy Behar's face that didn't quite reach her eyes. The audience erupted into applause as Whoopi Goldberg welcomed Ford, who was there to promote his latest film, a gritty character drama that had already drawn critical praise. At 83, he still carried that old-school charisma, a blend of ruggedness and weary charm. But even as he gave a few practiced soundbites about the film's message and the joys of working with a new generation of actors, something behind his eyes signaled he wasn't entirely comfortable. Joy Behar leaned forward, clasping her hands together with mock warmth. "So Harrison," she began, "you've made a career out of playing strong, silent types, Han Solo, Indiana Jones, men's men. Do you ever think those kinds of roles are a little outdated now?" Her tone was casual, but the subtext wasn't lost on anyone. Ford, ever the professional, chuckled politely. "Well, I think strong characters, male or female, never go out of style. It's about how the role's written." Joy didn't let up. "Sure, but don't you think playing those hyper-masculine roles, especially today, sends the wrong message? That men can just brood and shoot their way through problems. Isn't that part of the problem in our culture?" There was a collective breath hold from the audience. Ford shifted in his chair, straightened up, and for a moment, the charming smirk faded. "I don't think anyone watched Indiana Jones and thought, 'That's how I should solve my marriage,'" he said dryly. The audience laughed nervously, but Joy pressed further. "I mean, come on, Harrison. You're part of an era that built its image on swagger and guns. Maybe it's time we question whether your legacy is really something to be proud of." The room fell into an eerie silence. Ford's jaw tightened. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and stared her down, not with anger, but with a quiet intensity that had silenced enemies on screen for decades. "Joy," he said slowly, "I came here to talk about a film I care deeply about. If you want to have a real conversation, I'm all in. But if you're just looking for a soundbite to stir up a Twitter frenzy, you've got the wrong guy." Then came the moment that froze the audience and lit up the internet. Joy, unfazed, shrugged and muttered into her mic, "Some men just never evolve." Ford's head turned slowly. "What did you say?" he asked. She repeated it, louder this time. "I said, some men just never evolve." Ford stood, not angrily, not storming, but with quiet finality. He reached for the mic clipped to his jacket, peeled it off, and handed it to the nearest stagehand. "Thanks for having me," he said to Whoopi with a respectful nod. Then, without a glance toward Joy, he walked off the stage as the audience gasped, unsure whether to applaud or stay silent. The camera cut awkwardly to commercial, but it was too late. The moment had already taken flight, captured on smartphones, uploaded within minutes. Harrison Ford walks out of the View after Joy Behar insult was trending before the segment even ended. What was supposed to be a routine promotional appearance had just become a viral cultural flashpoint. Harrison Ford stepped into the black SUV waiting just beyond the studio gates. His phone had already begun buzzing, texts from his publicist, missed calls from his agent, and a flood of notifications on social media. Clips of the incident were already racking up views in the millions. #FordWalksOut was trending in over a dozen countries. Fans were polarized. Some hailed him as a legend who'd stood up to disrespect, others accused him of not being able to handle a strong woman's criticism. Back inside the View's studio, producers scrambled during the commercial break. Joy Behar remained composed, but even she seemed rattled. Whoopi Goldberg, ever the seasoned moderator, returned from the break with her usual poise but noticeably did not address the elephant in the room. The energy had shifted, and the rest of the show limped along like a wounded animal. Later that day, Ford released a short, measured statement through his representative, Mr. Ford appreciates the value of public discourse and is always willing to engage in thoughtful conversations. However, he does not participate in personal attacks masquerading as interviews. But that did little to calm the storm. Within hours, The View issued their own response, a vague, carefully worded message about supporting lively, respectful debate. Joy Behar remained unrepentant in private, but by the following morning, the pressure was mounting. Conservative and liberal outlets alike dissected the footage frame by frame. Media watchdogs debated whether Joy had gone too far. Talk radio had a field day. Clips of Ford's quiet, deliberate exit played on a loop across all networks. Then came the twist no one expected. A few days later, Harrison Ford sat down, this time, voluntarily, for a one-on-one interview. Not on a talk show, not on late-night TV, but in a quiet, pre-recorded segment with CBS veteran journalist Gayle King. Dressed in a simple gray sweater and jeans, Ford appeared calm, reflective, and perhaps even slightly amused. "I didn't walk out because I was angry," he said. "I walked out because I was tired of the game. We're living in a moment where outrage is currency, and I'm not interested in trading in that." Gayle pressed gently. "Do you regret walking out?" Ford smiled. "Not for a second. I've been in this business for 50 years. I've sat through every kind of question, insult, misunderstanding. But I always draw the line at being dismissed. When someone boils down your entire career to a stereotype and won't listen to your answer, what's the point in staying?" He paused, then added, "I wasn't offended as an actor. I was disappointed as a person." The segment aired during prime time and was met with overwhelming support. Fans applauded his candor. Even critics had to admit, Ford had handled the fallout with the same stoic grace that made him a star in the first place. In the weeks that followed, Joy Behar issued a clarification, not quite an apology, but a softened statement acknowledging that passionate conversations sometimes cross lines. The View saw a brief ratings bump from the controversy but faced internal pressure to recalibrate the tone of their interviews. As for Ford, he went back to promoting his film. It opened to strong reviews and box office success, bolstered, ironically, by the attention from the interview. But more than that, he became a symbol of an old-school dignity clashing with the new world of rapid-fire media storms. He didn't tweet, he didn't rant, he walked out, and in doing so, he said more than 1,000 fiery soundbites ever could. Dying down, Harrison Ford's unexpected appearance at the Venice Film Festival reignited the headlines. He wasn't on the original guest list. He wasn't promoting a new film. And yet, there he was, standing tall in front of flashing cameras, hand in hand with Callista Flockhart, wearing a simple black suit and his signature quiet smirk. But it wasn't just his presence that turned heads. It was what happened on stage during a special Q&A panel on legacy in Hollywood. The moderator, a well-respected Italian journalist, asked the inevitable question, "Mr. Ford, you became part of a global conversation recently after your appearance on The View. What do you think that moment says about the current state of public discourse?" Ford didn't flinch. "I think it says we've forgotten how to listen. We're too busy trying to win the argument before we've even heard the other person speak." A hush fell over the crowd. The actor's words struck deeper than any headline had managed to. Then, in a move no one anticipated, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is a letter," he said, "sent to me by a high school senior from Milwaukee." She watched the clip online and said it made her think differently, not about me, but about how we handled disagreement in general. She wrote, "You showed me that it's okay to walk away from disrespect without shouting. That strength isn't loud, sometimes it's quiet." The audience erupted into applause, not because of celebrity theatrics or controversy, but because of the sheer sincerity of the moment. Ford wasn't campaigning for sympathy or demanding vindication, he was showing the human side behind the viral clip. That moment became the centerpiece of international headlines. Ford reads teen's letter, redefines strength. Back in New York, Joy Behar was watching. Alone. She hadn't spoken much publicly since her vague clarification weeks earlier. But something about the Venice moment, about the simplicity of Ford's message, lingered. She found herself rewatching the footage, and for the first time, not defensively. She saw it. The tightening in Ford's jaw when she made the "never evolve" remark. The way he stayed composed, even in disagreement. The look in his eyes, not fury, but fatigue. And maybe, just maybe, she understood. Not just what she'd said, but how easily lines could blur when television demanded heat instead of heart. The following week, in a rare move, she opened The View with a personal message. "I've been thinking a lot about our role as interviewers. And about that moment with Harrison Ford. I won't pretend we saw eye to eye, but I do regret not listening better. Sometimes in this job, you're so focused on the next zinger, you forget there's a real person sitting across from you. There were no dramatic gasps, no wild applause. Just a quiet ripple of acknowledgement. And it was enough. Ford never responded publicly. He didn't need to. His silence was powerful, and his actions had already spoken volumes. But industry insiders noted that weeks later, he sent a handwritten note, not to the show, not to Joy, but to the show's youngest intern who had held the door open for him as he left that day. It read, "Sometimes the most important part of a conversation is knowing when to leave it behind. Keep holding doors open." The intern framed it, and just like that, the story came full circle, not with a scream, but with grace. In an age obsessed with being loud, Harrison Ford had reminded the world of something rare, the strength of walking away with dignity and the lasting echo of quiet conviction.